Welcome back to another episode of Practice Underwater. I am your host today, Dr. George Hariri, and I'm here with the head of Mastermind, director of Mastermind, Dr. Alex Sharp here is filling in for Matt Garino, who is in St. Lucia. So, poor man, all of my thoughts and prayers go out to him. And we'll go ahead and fill in for him while he's having a nice little yearly honeymoon with his wife. So how's it going, man?
It's going great, George. Thoughts and prayers for Matt having to deal with that. And we'll record our intros and outros and have fun while he's got his toes in the sand.
And we'll hopefully he makes a speedy recovery to his role at Practice Underwater. So
I do hear through the grapevine that he has gained 8 pounds in 8 days. So if anybody talks to Matt, be sure to ask him how the weight gain's going.
Oh, geez. We will not even touch that subject. So today we have, this is a really cool interview. So Suzanne, I think that this one is, she does really well here, and I'm really excited for her. So Alex, go ahead and introduce Tim for us, for our audience.
So Tim is a newer practice owner. He bought his practice back in January 2021. So the interesting time to buy a practice. Well, he bought it in 2021. He bought it 2 months ago. Yeah.
Okay.
So he's very, very new into practice ownership. And you can see that in a lot of his current approaches to running his practice. He took on a practice that has historically been a 1-doctor practice, and it is now a 2-doctor practice. So there's a lot of discussion that Suzanne brings up regarding that decision to keep it a 2-doctor practice and then what needs to be done around that to facilitate it becoming a really good, solid, excellent 2-doctor practice. There's a lot of talk about potential in this office. Like Tim is very high on the active patient count and what the practice can do. And I think this is a great example. Suzanne puts on a clinic of pointing out the different steps that are necessary to get from where he is to where he wants to be. Suzanne said from the very get-go, this is a coach's dream practice because there's so much opportunity.
And so this is a cool episode because on multiple levels. So one, the solo to group transition is becoming something that at Shared Practices, I think we're starting to really make our mark as something that we do really well, is taking these 1-doctor practices and smoothly transition them into 2-doctor group practices. And then the second thing is we talk about mindset so much, and to the point where we probably bother you. We probably annoy listeners with how the conversation is not tangible. Mindset is not tangible. And so one thing I hope this interview shows, and I want you to listen to it, is look at Tim's goals, look at what he says he wants, and then look at what he's doing. And we'll talk about it more in the outro and we'll get specific, but that disconnect between his goals and his actions, that's his mindset. It's when your vision, actions, execution, everything aligns, then you have a proper mindset. And so this is a great episode to show the concept that we keep hammering home, which is mindset matters more than almost anything else. And so in the outro, we'll really go through it. And we're going to spend time in this outro of really talking about, this mindset and the different areas where it shows up. This is, I think on all accounts, I think we've had a few of these lately, like just really straightforward growth coaching practices that if they just got some simple things in place and sort of got, thinking the right way, their practice could grow a lot. And so this is another one of those because the one thing he has in abundance is patience. And so whenever you have that issue, it's really easy to grow practice. So Alex, anything to add there?
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, mindset matters so critically, and especially in a practice like this where there is opportunity, like just out the wazoo. Like you can grow this practice with that patient flow. And Tim talks about how little competition there is in like a rural type area. I mean, the sky's the limit for a practice like this. And what goes the jumping off point to get from industry standard to an excellent practice is that mindset piece, that being diligent about getting a little bit better every day and knowing what to do, developing that action plan. That's what's really going to help Tim overcome those hurdles.
All right. So without further ado, we are jumping into the interview with our real doc, fake name Tim.
All right, Practice Underwater today, and I have an exciting guest for everyone, a real doctor, fake name Tim. Tim, how are you today?
Hey, Suzanne, I'm doing good. Excited to be here.
I'm excited you're here as well. This is what I'm going to call a coach's dream practice. Okay, you're going to hear me say that a couple of times. I'm excited. Just in a quick look at dental intel a couple of minutes prior to our call, I already, am sitting here like just can't wait to jump in. So why don't we start with you telling me about the practice? How long have you had the practice?
Sure. So I just acquired the practice early January, so pretty much the beginning of 2021. I've had it for about 2 months. It's a very old practice. It's been established about 30 years. Um, the seller has been here for 30 years. A lot of goodwill here, huge patient base, very very low competition in the area. Not as much competition as maybe surrounding areas. It's just a very good overall practice. Like a great practice to buy. I think overall, no marketing done, just a ton of opportunity to grow. I think here.
Okay. So when you say no marketing, you really mean no marketing? Like I could not find you guys online. So is that what no marketing means? No website?
So there is no website. There's no effort at all to do any type of SEO. There's only 15 Google reviews, and those are all just natural reviews over time that patients have written without being asked. So it's kind of bare bones in terms of marketing for sure. There was a zero marketing budget past probably 10 years here. So,
yeah. Okay. And despite that, tell us about your new patient flow.
The new patient flow is about 40 new patients a month, pretty consistently. That's the baseline, just from insurance, walk-ins, and word of mouth. It's pretty solid, I'd say, for no marketing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So take us through now, like the practice hours, the practice schedule. Do you practice on your own? Do you have an associate? Tell me about all of that.
Sure. So the practice hours are 7:30 to 4, Monday to Thursday, and then 7:30 to noon on Fridays. We take a 1 hour and 15-minute lunch every day. The associate is the seller, and we're both working here full time. We have 8 chairs, so there's plenty of space here. We have 6.5 hygiene days a week. So we have a full-time hygienist every day, a hygienist half a day every day. So about six or 7 hygiene days a week. The seller, we had originally planned for him to stay on 2 days, but he just ended up staying full-time. We're both producing pretty decently. It's been pretty good, pretty smooth transition overall. Him being here has really helped me with his staff. And
just so I'm clear, previous owner doing half days or full days?
Oh, we're both doing full days. So obviously I'm seeing more patients than him. I'm doing all the recalls. I'm seeing most of the new patients. So I'm building my schedule. And then anything that overflows, he picks up. Like if I'm doing a big procedure or something and I don't have time, he picks them up, and we're able to do a lot of same day work because there's now, instead of one doc, there's 2 docs here. So we're slowly starting to grow the practice just by doing that.
So what have we got on the patient base side? You said large, solid. I'm looking at dental intel does about 2,500 active patients.
Yeah.
Right?
That sounds right. Yeah. About 2,500 active patients. Definitely an older crowd. Probably the majority are over 50, 40 or 50. Some young crowd. Good mix. Of all demographics, all ethnicities, and everything. There's a lot of opportunity, a lot of missing teeth, a lot of undiagnosed treatment. So plenty on the table.
Do you and the previous owner do the same types of procedures? Are you doing stuff he doesn't do?
So he was doing mainly bread and butter and referring out all endo, all difficult extractions, including wisdom teeth. So I um, anterior and premolar endo. So I've done uh, a good handful of those so far. I do all surgical extractions. I do wisdom teeth that aren't impacted. So and I do bone grafting. I'm planning to add molar endo and implants in the next few months. As I get settled in here to
Okay.
try to grow a little more. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to reiterate this: 10 doctor days, 6.5 hygiene days. Correct?
I'd say 9 doctor days. 9 doctor days and 6.5 hygiene days.
Okay. I'm interested to find out how far booked out the hygienists are.
Yeah. They're about 6 weeks booked out fully.
So if I were a new patient calling the practice, then I'd have to wait that long or longer probably to get in,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Absolutely. There's always cancellations, and there's maybe like 1 or 2 gaps a week to fill in the new patients. But yeah, definitely the majority of new patients would have to wait for sure. That's definitely something I need to address coming up.
Mm-hmm. So what is the long-term plan there? He was going to work, the seller was going to work a couple of days. Now you guys are recognizing that you need all these doctor days. So tell me about the long-term plan.
So the long-term plan, obviously, so my other hygienist, who's not full-time, she's working a half a day. She's older. She's in her 70s. She's doing mainly prophies. So she's planning to retire in August. So I'm bringing on another hygienist that I know from my previous associateships, and she produces really well, probably maybe 1,000 a day at her previous job. So I'm hoping she can come in and really expand the hygiene, grow the hygiene department. The other hygienist I have is young. She was already here, but she was part time, and then there was another third hygienist who retired the week after I began here. So I made the young hygienist full time, so she's now starting to kind of do code diagnosis. Like I know in the previous episodes back in season 2 with Justin Short, they were talking about code diagnosis and stuff. So we've started doing that. So that's getting a lot more out of hygiene now. We're doing more deep cleanings that should be done. That a lot of patients, haven't been getting that for many years. And so that's a long-term plan for hygiene. Just add hygiene days so that we're not so booked out. Do more fluorides, do more eventually perio chip, and do more Paradex rinses, stuff like that. And then on the restorative side, I want to. Currently, there's no TVs or anything. I have one intraoral camera going that I use, but I wanted to get that involved a lot more. Reactivate the old patient base because there's about 9,000 patients in our database. So if we can reactivate a lot of those patients before we do our external marketing campaign, I think we'd be getting the most out of what we have right now so far first. Long-term picture, I think this can be a $1.5 to $2 million office. Definitely multiple GPs, maybe a specialist or two in there. For marketing, my plan is I've been kind of debating on what kind of marketing I want to do. There's obviously there's these web developers who can make the website and then they can maintain the website. Or there's these bigger marketing companies. There's one called Patient Pop that I've talked to that. So for like a monthly fee, they would basically do website, all SEO, make my social media presence, kind of take care of everything, reviews and all that. So I've kind of been debating what I need. My plan is to start actually marketing once the growth of my practice starts to plateau. So I wasn't going to start doing any of the marketing until then. When I first started, I had these plans. My staff gave me a lot of pushback in the beginning, so I kind of calmed down on that. But we're still going without really doing too much different, just with us being here, two doctors here to just do more stuff. So.
This episode is brought to you by Swell. So all of us who are already using Swell know that it crushes reputation management. It's like turning on a steady stream of reviews that requires no effort from your team and just works. It's amazing. Additionally, it makes it easy to stay in touch with all of your patients before and after their visits. And it even has a great way to set up a virtual waiting room. But there's more good news. Swell has a brand new version of their platform. And on top of being simpler than ever to use, you can now actually get patients to pay via mobile, which is incredible. The reason that Swell is so effective at getting reviews is they make it easy. They've now brought that same ease of use to paying for dental treatment even after patients have left the office. Mobile payments are a great way to text them a reminder so they can pay at their convenience right on their phone. You can pay via credit or debit card, ACH, or even Apple Pay or Google Pay with just a few taps. No more phone calls, no more chasing people down with emails and letters that always seem to get lost. And it gets better. This new release includes Swell Schedule, which is an easy way for patients to request an appointment time that works for them, so you can lock down those appointments quicker. Listen, Swell is one of those things that you just need to try it out, turn it on, see the results, and then you're converted and you're like, well, I'm never going to shut this off. Listeners of the Shared Practices podcast can try Swell for free for 30 days. No commitment. Just set it up, see the results for yourself before you pay anything. To take advantage of this offer, head to swellcx.com/sharedpractices. That's swellcx.com/sharedpractices.
So tell the audience about those changes and the pushback. What kind of changes did you implement that the team wasn't happy about? I'm curious.
In the beginning, it was almost everything. In the beginning, they were very caught off guard about just me being there because this staff has been here for a while. My assistant's been here for 30 years with the seller. My office manager has been here 6 years. Two of the hygienists were there for over 10. So any change I had, so I did put in Revenue Well. That's something that I use that's really worked so far. That's more of like an internal marketing platform. So that basically is just sending confirmations, reminders, getting people's emails in the system, doing some email communication. We started doing a treatment plan follow-up email, so that's really worked. We're sending out like birthday emails, that kind of stuff. We're doing a recall where patients get an email like if they're due or something like that. Just trying to get some of the old patient base back in here a little bit.
So was that was a lot of change, like having a patient communication system instead of making phone calls, kind of bringing the practice to the 21st century? Just that
exactly.
Was a big change. Okay.
Yeah, it was because, sometimes front desk staff, they have a fear that their jobs will get taken by, technology or outsourcing. And that's something tough to kind of get the staff on board with. So you have to do it very slowly and gradually. You can't go in there and try to change a bunch of stuff because what happened was that when that was happening, when I was kind of micromanaging more in the beginning, the staff would get more stressed out. They would start to turn on each other a little bit, and I had to call like a meeting and kind of calm people down. And after that, I just told them, look, I'm just pretend I'm an associate here, and let's just do things the way they've been done before I was here. And then once I said that, things really calmed down, and actually we started to produce a lot more. So in my opinion, maybe it depends what kind of practice it is, but for some offices, the better strategy might be to really give it 6 months, not changing much, and just start probing, just do very small, gradual things. And eventually my plan is to get the staff to fully trust me, and then start changing things at maybe the 6-month mark, like start the marketing at the 6-month mark or so, and get things more in the direction that I want to get in. Yeah.
So what about the front office team? What do we have as support there?
For the front office team, I have 2 front desk. So one is my office manager, and she does all the claims. She does all the insurance end of it. The other one is a cross-trained front and back. She's not a true assistant, but she can take x-rays. She can set up, clean up, suction. So she kind of handles the phones a little bit more with the scheduling, the follow-up, with the communication a little bit, and just jumps in the back whenever we're getting busy in the back.
Okay. Does she need to jump in often? Like, do you not have enough assistants back there?
So we have one assistant back. The seller, he does a lot of procedures without an assistant. So that's really been great. We've added a whole new doctor without adding a single staff member. So it's my overhead pretty lean right now. So the main assistant basically works with me. Since I'm used to an assistant, and she's very strong. She's been doing it a long time. So, and she knows the office inside and out. She knows everything. She knows the patients. A lot of the patients that have been coming for a long time know her. So she sets me up pretty well. And the other front desk jumps back to help the seller when he needs something. He just kind of calls her, and she comes back and does whatever he needs, and then she goes back up front.
So have you purposely wanted this lean and mean type approach?
I haven't. Yeah, I did want to keep the overhead lean, especially in the beginning. When I was starting out, because when I didn't know how the cash flow was when I got in here, because his tax return was kind of difficult to read. We only had like 1 year to really go on. And the previous years, he had 2 practices that were shown on 1 tax return. So, and he sold his other office the year before. So it was I kind of didn't know that much about the cash flow. I just knew that there was a lot of opportunity. But then when I started working and I really got a handle on the expenses and everything, it turned out to be pretty lean overall from what I thought. But yeah, I wanted to keep it, the overhead in the 50s, and right now I am doing that. But long term, I need to grow, so I'm going to have to spend money. I'm going to have to bring in another assistant. I'm going to have to bring in, maybe a full-time front desk, just so we have a bigger capacity overall to handle patients, because that is something that handcuffs us from really getting to maybe like a triple digit per month collections, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just to put some context around, you mentioned the collection. So 2019, the seller did about 750, right? Somewhere like 63, 65 a month. Okay, I'm going to skip 2020 for a moment because, that period may not have been as consistent. Sure. Of course, there was a drop there. And then in January, you guys did 75, and in February, 86.
We produced in January around 75, around there, and we in February produced 86. Yeah.
Okay. So, go ahead.
Yeah, we collected around 68 in January, and then February about 78.
With dental intel, seeing projections really depends on having codes attached to a particular appointment. So to understand what the projections are for the upcoming months, just having that code that's either in hygiene or on the doctor's side, having those codes attached to that future appointment is going to help us see what the projections are, because I can't necessarily see future months. I think your vision for this practice could be achieved sooner rather than later, but you're really describing what infrastructure is needed to be able to get you there, right? It's one of those, you're going to have to spend money to make money, or the practice is going to plateau at this point. But I'm still not clear on what the long-term plan is for this previous owner.
So the previous owner, he's planning on staying 2 years, 2 full years, and he's been producing about 30,000 both months, both January and February, which is pretty. He's very satisfied with that. You know, he's in his 60s. You know, he's trying to get into partial retirement age. I produce 30 the first month, and then mid 40s in February. So I want to keep him around for as long as I can, you know, just to make it as stable as possible. And it's been helping a lot, you know. So I'd say I keep him for 2 years, and then once he leaves, maybe I'll bring on another associate or so. Does that answer your question?
So adding hygiene for you, I'm picking your brain about what the future looks like here. So adding hygiene means you doing a lot more checks, because you're saying this associate isn't necessarily checking hygiene?
So no, I've been checking the hygiene just because I wanted to meet the patients, you know, and I think it's important, you know, especially in the first 6 months for the buyer to really meet the patients. So once things really start to heat up and the new hygienist does come in, I'm going to make her full-time. So I'll have 2 full-time hygiene every day. So that'll make it about 9 hygiene days a week. And that'll turn into more hygiene checks. We'll be able to get more new patients to have hygiene appointments a lot sooner. I think it'll grow the whole practice overall. Like the number of active patients should be around 3,000, 3,500. And at that point, we'll both be having to do checks and everything. He still does checks. For example, like last week, I was doing a case where I was doing 6 anterior crowns. You know, it takes a little time. So he kind of jumps in and does checks when I'm doing stuff like that. He's a seller. He wants to see his practice and his staff and his patients taken care of for a long time. So he is having a lot of, he's very invested in my success. It's helped a lot.
Well, it sounds like he's got a good gig, right? No management, no headache, no assistant. No hygiene checks. He's like living the good life, sold the practice, and now kind of like, you know, so again, I'm kind of asking you these questions because I feel like I'm wanting you to think through this. How is he feeding his schedule?
So his schedule, it's very interesting. It just naturally just happens, you know. He has a lot of over the years, he has so much treatment that he's diagnosed that's gone pending. He's kind of fixing his old treatment right now. Like if a crown that he did 5 years ago breaks or something, like he's redoing a lot of his own work. But since it's been some time, you know, it's still not it's still production at that point. He is seeing some new patients, when my schedule gets full. So he's kept up his schedule somehow,
Mm-hmm.
Our front desk have kind of made it nice that way.
Mm-hmm. So what's your arrangement with him in terms of his redos? What's your arrangement financially?
He does his redos. So we have a 1-year warranty for anything. And if it's outside of a year, I mean, the patients know this upfront. And anything that's his work, he redoes as long as he's here, which I think he's going to be here for the next year or two. And that's pretty much it. If it's outside of a year, we're going to charge the patient again for it. It's just a warranty. That's the we have that rule set up here.
So if he's doing a redo and there's no charge for the patient, you're obviously not including that in his compensation. Or are you?
No, I'm not. No. He's paid 2% of collections. So whatever he collects, whatever we charge out, he's paid 32% of it. That's pretty much it. He's getting the AR from the insurance from 90 days past still. So, yeah.
Okay. So him being there as many days as he is, and him limiting his own schedule by either not having an assistant or deciding not to do hygiene checks. At the end of the day, it helps with the inventory that he needs to work on redoing his work or whatever patient wants to see him specifically.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that help you doctor-wise, unless you want to work 7 days a week? How does this help you see more patients, more new patients once you start marketing?
Yeah, so how it's going to help is basically I see the majority of the new patients. Every new patient that I am available to see, I see. And I see as many of the recall exams as I can see. If I'm busy or not available, that's where he comes in kind of. So if we get our new patient flow up to 60 or 80, then we're definitely going to need him to see a lot more new patients, basically. Because there's only so much that I can handle myself. I also, like you said, I'm going to have to spend money to make money. So I have to buy implant gear, basically a motor, everything that comes for implants. I have to get that, So I want to be doing some more of these more productive procedures. So that's kind of where he comes in. He's told me hey, I'll do fillings all day. So he wants to do a lot more of the restorative. So that's kind of what I would do if there's a lot of fillings and stuff to do. Instead of delaying the patient's treatment, we would just have him do a lot of the work that it might not be the most productive for me, basically. Like if I'm going to do a root canal and a crown, like a molar endo and a crown or something, try to finish it in the same day, then the seller, while I'm doing that, might be available to take on an exam, a new patient, or some other same day emergency coming in. That's I think that that's how we've kind of grown so far. If you ask me the main reason why our numbers are up, it's because there's 2 of us now.
Mm-hmm. So is it your intention to continue to work 5 days?
For now, yeah. I think so. It really, my long-term goal is to work 3 days clinically. My long-term goal is to bring on some specialists, maybe an endodontist or maybe a periodontist, and an associate. After he retires, I want to bring in a more, maybe a younger, productive associate who also is kind of hungry as well. And and then my long-term goal is to work 3 days, do a lot more implant cases, that kind of stuff, and kind of run the business. That's my long-term overall goal. blast off the marketing to the max.
So you've got a feast going here. You have a feast. You've just started to sit down for dinner here.
Yeah.
I want you to be thinking about hygiene and associate and all of that a lot earlier than I think you are planning. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the details of that on, part 2 of this episode. Like I said early on, this is an absolute, I am salivating. This is a dream come true for a coach in terms of all of the opportunities. There are so many opportunities here. And I hate to see you kind of not tapping into those resources sooner rather than later, honestly. So should we dig into the rest?
Let's go. I'm ready.
All right. So this is another episode of Practice Underwater. I want everyone to join us again next week. We have so many things to talk about. So see you all next week, guys.
All right. So when we started this episode, we kind of talked about, we wanted you guys to listen for mindset. And I think that that's something that, I like that we have Alex on today, because the way our coaching department works is all of our coaching clients, we make them, mastermind is included. It's not an option. Mastermind is included. And we include things like that, like Swell, like Dental Intel, like Mastermind, that are not options, that we think they're absolutely necessary. And the reason that we view Mastermind as a total necessity is because the doctor to doctor growing of a mindset, the shared practices mindset, is very important. And this one we talked about a lot in the episode, how much his practice will benefit. And even part 2, you're going to see it even more with Suzanne. She's going to talk about all the opportunities to grow. But we talk a lot about the practice, the staff, the patients, all of the systems in the practice, all of the protocols, all those things, and what can happen when done properly. But the piece that I'm happy Alex is going to touch on is his mindset. Like, Alex, can you take a minute and really talk about, obviously, right, Alex is the guy that runs our mastermind, and that's where we really develop mindset. And can you talk about his mindset from your perspective? And I guess let's get tangible, because the listeners have a hard time with this one, right, of really understanding what we mean by mindset development. And so can you talk about that?
So first of all, when I think of mindset, I think of it being an ever-evolving thing. You're never at the finish line with mindset. And to make it less nebulous, I would call mindset just like your overall approach and your decision-making tree that you use internally when you're going about your day. Like, take Tim, for example. He's very relatable as a new practice owner, because I think a lot of us that have acquired practices, we have this scarcity mindset that comes in when we take over an office, we inherit a long-standing team, and we know that there's some degree of attachment of those patients to the team. Especially in his tender point in ownership, 2 months in, he's all too aware of how the previous doctor did things, how the seller did things. And since the seller is still there, there's all that extra baggage of the staff tending to look to the seller, defaulting to what the seller used to do. And so he's touched on the fact that there's a lot of hesitancy from the staff to go out of their comfort zone and get patients reactivated, to be proactive about getting patients on the books. And that mindset factor of being a new owner, it's normal. That's the thing. Like, normal, whether you want to put quotation marks around it or not, that's the default for most people. And what we do in our mastermind, like George said, is to help people overcome that and have a more healthy, abundant, forward-thinking, future-thinking mindset, rather than saying like, oh, Martha, the hygienist that I inherited, is going to quit if I ask her to reappoint her patients. So a lot of mindset growth that is available for Tim if he so chooses. And that's going to help take that practice to the next level. And in part 2, we'll definitely see some more evidence of that.
So when we talk about mindset, right, it's essentially where I say I want something, right? And usually people are pretty clear on what they want. Hopefully, right? That's a whole nother thing. But for the most part, he seems pretty clear on that. He wants a 2-doctor practice. He wants to be doing between 1.5 and 2. Right now he's doing 750, under $1 million pace. He's pretty clear on his goals. But all of his actions are not aligning with his goals. He's doing all of the wrong things. Therefore, will not get there, as it currently states. And that is where mindset comes in, right? By recalibrating his mindset, he'll then be able to see the proper action plan to get him to where he wants to go. So I'm just going to kind of rattle off, a few areas where mindset showed up in the interview. So 1, the 9 doctor days to 6.5 hygiene days. We'll talk about that for sure. The pushback from staff every time we get changes, the conversation around lean and mean overhead, the seller staying on, the desire to work 3 days, but is working 5. Those are very tangible examples. Each one of those actions that he is doing around those areas are actually not aligned with his goals. So the way to, with a proper mindset development, let's talk about each of those things. So Alex, I got to start with, the 9 doctor days to 6.5 hygiene days. Do you want to take that one? What?
That's a new one. And Suzanne did a really good job of unpacking this, because I think she was a little perplexed by it as well. And I can relate to this a little bit, because being in a more rural area, you have a lot of patients that maybe are lower income, that perhaps are drawn to coming in only when a tooth hurts. So technically they're patients, but they're not good recall patients, or so we would be led to believe. So obviously this practice has been doing nothing but patchwork and extractions, and not developing a good comprehensive hygiene program at all. So that's how you get people that are in the hygiene program, but not necessarily getting reappointed properly. Therefore, the hygiene program's not growing. So I think understanding that he needs to put a full-time hygienist in there tomorrow and use those 8 operatories, that's the lowest of low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And from my perspective, right, let's unpack this fully, right? I'm going to spend a lot of time on this one, because this bugs me to my inner core, because it's everything that bothers me about the way the industry currently thinks about things. And it makes practically no sense, but we still do it. So if I were to tell you a practice has 6.5 hygiene days, what would you expect their production collections to be?
Probably low, very, very
so
low.
1 hygienist full-time, it's tough to get past 700K.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? You got 1 hygienist, you're only checking for 4 days of hygiene. You got, okay. So then we add half of that. So it's okay, so we have a hygiene and a half. So that puts us at 900. What's his practice doing?
750. He's grown a little, so he may be on pace for 800.
So he did 78K. Yeah. So he's doing 800.
Yeah.
So his hygiene days correlate very well with his size of his practice. Now let's look at his doctor days. If I were to tell you 9 doctor days, we got 1 doctor working 5 days, another one working 4 days. How large would you expect that practice to be?
Well, that's a $2 million practice.
Yeah.
Bare minimum should be.
So I have a practice doing, call it 2.7 on 9 doctor days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So actually it's 8.5. So right. What is the more closely predicator of how a practice can do? I have 17 hygiene days or something like that. You know what I mean? That's why we're doing those numbers.
Yeah.
Hygiene. Not because I have 8.5 doctor days.
Yeah. Hygiene's the rate limiting step with this. And the killer is that there seems to be no shortage of patients. There seems to be,
yes.
Dental Intel would suggest that there's a lot of untapped potential, a lot of, meat left on the bone as far as reactivation goes. But again, Suzanne points out, capacity is the problem. There is nowhere to put those patients as the schedule is currently constituted. And back to mindset, Tim has it in his head that there's going to be a stepwise progression of older hygienist that's working half a day every day, retires, then bring on a full-time hygienist, rather than both anding it, where you can keep the elder lady, add another full-time hygienist, add 4.5 more hygiene days a week immediately, and then boom, we're tickling $1 million practice at that point.
So it's a concept that we call, it's part of it's one of the pillars of our philosophy, is one of the core things of how we go practice is hygiene-led growth. And it's that concept that the 6.5 days of hygiene predicts the size of the practice, not the 9 doctor days. It's the hygiene days that lead the show. And so growing the hygiene days grows the practice, right? He clearly does not have that mindset right now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have, first of all, we like a 2-to-1 ratio. So if we have 6.5 hygiene days, we think 13 doctor days is the right number. Right? Or sorry, other way around.
Flip it.
So half.
Yes.
Right? So we would need 3 to 4 doctor days. That's a 1 doctor practice right now. He's doing less than $1 million. That's a 1 doctor practice.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So something is not adding up.
No, and there's not a compelling reason aside from consistency to keep the seller on. Tim pointed out that his initial idea was keep the seller on for 2 days a week. Somehow that ballooned to 4.5 days per week. So from Tim's vantage point, he's letting these factors in his practice dictate where his practice is going rather than calling, okay, full stop. This decision does not fit within my vision. My vision is sacrosanct. It's going to happen. And certain things like the staff having pushback, the seller magically wanting to work more, the older hygienist not wanting to add capacity. Like these are things that fly in the face of what Tim says he wants. So what we would believe that Tim would be well advised to do is revisit that vision and come up with an action plan stepwise to figure out how do we get from point A where we are to point B where we want to be.
And it's funny because I'm looking at this, right? And if I got a seller that wants to stay and I want a group practice, then Tim is right. Keeping on the seller makes sense. But you've got to add hygiene days. And I personally, if he wants to work 3 days, I'd cut down to 3 days right now. That would put me at 7 doctor days. And if I add 4 days of hygiene, I'm now at 10.5 hygiene days. I'm feeling a lot better about that ratio. I'm moving my way into the 2-to-1, working my way towards 14 days of hygiene, where I then have it proportional to the number of doctors I have, as opposed to keeping it there. And so to harp on my next pet peeve is the reason why he is not expanding hygiene is his overhead, right? And gosh, you couldn't get he's lucky I wasn't on the interview. That wouldn't have been a fun one. It just that mindset is tough for me. It's a really tough. It makes no sense. It makes practically no sense.
It's industry standard. It's what's perpetuated by a lot of the major CPA companies, getting us to fixate on overhead percentages and thinking that by keeping the overhead percentage in a certain range, we're winning, so to speak. But really, we talk about the ugly duckling phase, and everything in the ugly duckling phase is predicated on growing that overhead temporarily to facilitate overall practice growth. You're going to have periods where your staff overhead doesn't look so hot. You're 40% some months as you're adding capacity, but that's a step along the path.
I don't think I ever crossed 34%. I think that was my highest ever.
That's great.
Have you ever been higher than that?
There was one point where I was 40. Yeah, I was 40 for a month, where we're in between.
Maybe I had a bad month like that, but I think over a 3-month span, I think 34% was my high.
When we added a full-time hygienist and a full-time front office from nothing, that was. But then immediately we took off after that.
Yeah. And it's that, so analytics are cool because we're analytics-based practice management. And with analytics, you set an objective and then you focus on looking at the data on how to achieve that objective. So when we set an objective for a practice and a practice owner, our objective is for them to make the most income, grow their net worth through their practice size, and be as happy as possible. Those are our objectives, those 3: growth, income, happiness. Those are our objectives. It seems like in our industry, those are not the objectives, because the decisions we make are not based on any of those things, right? So, Tim isn't we're smashing him, but we're not really smashing him. We're smashing the way our industry thinks. like he referenced, some stuff he had heard even on our show that we've had before that was just totally not serving him, right? Because if you have it like, okay, since when is one of our objectives in practice ownership to keep our staff overhead and our overhead percentage as low as possible? When did that become an objective?
When it was made to be one, when the people that are non-dentists telling us what we should be looking at made it an objective. Because I think it's helpful to know, but it shouldn't be a decision point. It's a helpful thing to reference just to make sure we're not going off the rails, but it shouldn't be like a die-hard, we're going to run our practice so that this percentage that's rather arbitrary stays within certain confines.
Yeah, it's the worst apples to oranges that people think is a true comparison in dentistry right now. Like you got people in different markets with different insurance reimbursements and different staff wages, and we're gonna put everyone in this box of having to have their staff overhead be roughly 25%, but definitely no more than 30, and try to keep it under 20. And if you can do that, then you can feel great about how you're doing. And it's like
get the gold star.
You get the gold star, exactly. And I mean, I remember a practice underwater guest we had on a while ago who cut a front office to get a staff overhead below 20, and then his practice tanked. And now his fixed costs are high. He makes much less money, but his staff overhead percentage is much lower. So like, let's give him a round of applause.
Yeah. Win-win. Yeah. Great job.
Yeah. Right. Like it's just, I this mindset of staff overhead is the toughest for me to deal with, because I can't wrap my mind around how it makes sense. Yet in our industry, every single person out there, every consulting company, every person is just fixated on this. And it serves a purpose in a stable practice. If he had said, my practice is doing 750K and I want it to remain at 750K, then I'd say, okay, let's make sure your staff overhead percentage is below 30% so you're profitable. But if he came to us and said, I would like a $1.5 to $2 million practice. So my staff costs, if I want to double the size of my practice, what do you think is going to happen to my staff costs?
At least double.
At least double. So you got to start increasing them. And you got to do that first. You can't do the dentistry without the providers to do the dentistry before you can, you know what I mean? And he already has 9 doctor days. Like adding a hygienist is one of the most profitable things he could do, yet it will not do it because it'll increase the staff overhead percentage. So that's a major issue I have. And I think Suzanne is so good about being very polite and all of the things during these interviews. And, I don't want it to seem like we're harping on, Tim is not doing anything that is not being done by every dentist in our industry.
Precisely.
So this isn't anything about Tim specifically. This is about the way our industry thinks about this, that showed up through Tim because he's learned about it from people in our industry that have this terrible mindset.
Right.
So this is mindset for you, right? Like the way of thinking about overhead, what action does it cause is not hiring a hygienist. What action does that cause is not maximizing my doctor production month over month, not growing my practice into the practice I want, having actually less profitability and being less happy and less busy and working more days. All of those things are happening due to the mindset.
Yeah, it's also interrelated, interconnected. And really, we, like George said, we harp on mindset almost endlessly, but it really is the underpinning of all these decisions, all these different approaches. And you could take one doctor in one practice and take a different doctor in an identical practice, and the one that's going to do better long-term, I guarantee you, is the one that has a more healthy, abundant mindset.
So this is the, so now I want to talk about the last point I want to bring up is, we talk about, like this is a coach's dream. Like what would coaching give this guy is really focus. Like we're going to focus on these two. Like that's the thing I love about coaching is, we look at the analytics, we look at the entire practice, we understand the vision, and we know the next steps. And so we give them a clear, concise action plan. And then when it comes up where it's like, okay, you need to hire a hygienist for 4 days a week or 3 days a week or whatever our coaching department would decide, he's going to give us pushback. Then we work through the mindset stuff and help him get on board. We don't change our plan. Green light means go for adding hygiene in this practice.
Yeah.
So that needs to happen, and we will help him get there. And by doing it and seeing it work, his mindset will grow and he'll begin to trust a new process. And so that's one thing he'll get from coaching. The other thing is he talked about it. He's like, he's getting pushback from staff for making changes. And it's like in every acquisition, you're going to make changes. I actually agree with the philosophy of not changing a lot right away. But the thing is that I think the philosophy misses the way that it's been said in the past is being very selective about what you change. I'm going to change 2 things initially. And I'm going to have those 2 things be the 2 things that are going to propel my practice forward the furthest, gain the most trust with my team, have them start trusting me that it's working. And then the next changes are easier. Right now, he's tinkering with things that don't matter, like the schedule. Like you got 9 doctor days. The way you schedule appointments right now does not matter. You have an abundance of doctor capacity. So that's not something to tinker with right now. And so it's learning that distinction and knowing what buttons to push, what buttons to leave alone until there are further issues down the road. That's another thing you get from coaching is prioritizing so that you don't get that pushback from the team. And then when you do get it, you learn how to work through it. So those are just some things I saw that, wow, there's a lot here.
And to Tim's credit, like he's handled the new owner overwhelm pretty well because he seems to have a decent head on his shoulders. He's overwhelmed. And that's what coaching brings to the table, is to helping you navigate through that whirlwind of overwhelm and come up with a few tangible action items that it's hard to find unless you have an outside set of eyes on it. I mean, even with, you gave the coaching example, like part of the interplay between coaching and mastermind is we have the coaching department working with our clients. And then when they're in mastermind, we hear like, oh, I can't believe the coach is recommending that I do this, or I don't agree with the coach on this. And then we hash it out in mastermind and we say, you know what, here's the numbers to it. Here's why that's a good decision. Here's why that investment makes sense. Here's why front loading that amount of money at the moment makes sense long-term. So the mindset work never stops.
Absolutely. So, I think it's really cool because next part, Suzanne goes through, I like that she phases these things. I think that's one thing I really like about her style is she'll priority 1, priority 2, kind of go through and she's learned how to talk to dentists.
Mm-hmm.
And
she's
so
the coach's coach. She's the best coach.
Yeah, she is. So it's really cool to watch her go. And there's times that I look at her and I'm like, wow, like, you communicate this in a way that I don't. So,
very
kudos.
tactful, very diplomatic.
Yes, she knows how to communicate with dentists and non-dentists, and it shows. And so it's really, really cool. And so next week you're going to see that. And she'll go through a lot of the things we discussed, right? Like this is his practice. We saw it in part 1 and we talked about the mindset issues. And so a lot of these same things are going to come up next week in more actionable ways of like on a team member level, like an actionable item Monday morning you can implement on how to actually do these things. So thanks for listening to this week's episode of Practice Underwater. Alex and I are going to be back for next week's intro and outro while Matt is on his leave.
Thoughts and prayers.
We'll see you guys.